The morning sun filtered through my kitchen window, casting golden streaks across the breakfast table where my daughter Emma sat, glowing in her ivory silk robe, her cheeks still flushed from the wedding 2 days ago. Across from her, Michael, my new son-in-law, buttered his toast with the careful precision of a man who had never taken abundance for granted. I watched them from the counter, coffee mug warming my hands, trying to shake the unease that had settled in my chest like a stone. Emma was radiant, laughing at something Michael whispered in her ear, and I wanted desperately to believe this was simply a mother's natural worry about her daughter's new marriage. The ceremony was beautiful. "Sarah," Michael said, looking up at me with those dark eyes that had charmed Emma so completely, "you did an incredible job organizing everything." "Emma did most of the work," I replied, refilling my mug. "I just wrote the checks." The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Michael's gaze sharpened almost imperceptibly, and I caught the way his fingers stilled on his toast. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. "Mom's being modest," Emma said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. She handled all the vendor negotiations, the venue deposits, everything. I don't know how we would have managed without her. Michael nodded, but I noticed how his attention lingered on my diamond wedding ring, the one David had given me 23 years ago, the ring that, to most people, suggested comfort but not wealth. If only he knew what else David had left me. "Speaking of managing things," Michael said, his tone carefully casual, "Emma and I have been talking about getting our finances organized. You know, proper planning for the future." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. "We thought it might be smart to set up a family trust for when we have kids someday." Emma beamed at him, then at me. "Isn't that wonderful, Mom? He's so responsible about planning ahead." The envelope sat on the table between us like a challenge. I didn't touch it. "That's very thoughtful," I said slowly. "But surely you two are still getting used to being married. There's no rush for such formal arrangements." Michael's smile never wavered, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Actually, our financial advisor suggested we move quickly. You know how unpredictable the market can be. The sooner we establish a solid foundation, the better protected we'll all be." "All of us?" I asked. "Well, yes. Family is family." "Right. We're all in this together now." Emma looked between us, sensing the subtle tension, but not understanding it. "The paperwork just outlines some basic structures," she said. "Michael explained it all to me. It's really just a formality." I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight. Too heavy for basic paperwork, too detailed for a formality. "I'll need to have my lawyer review this," I said. "Of course," Michael agreed quickly. "Take all the time you need. We just thought it would be good to get the ball rolling." But as I set the envelope aside, I caught the way his jaw tightened. Whatever was in there, he'd been counting on a quick signature after they left for their honeymoon later that morning. I sat alone in my study with the envelope. Inside were 15 pages of dense legal language. But the essence was clear enough. Michael wanted to establish a Rodriguez family trust with himself as the primary trustee. The trust would consolidate all family assets and expected inheritances for optimal management and distribution. The audacity of it took my breath away. He'd known Emma for 18 months, married her for 3 days, and was already positioning himself to control not just her assets, but mine as well. I thought about David then, my husband of 20 years who had died suddenly of a heart attack just 14 months ago. David, who had been so careful about protecting our wealth, who had established multiple accounts and holdings in ways that even I hadn't fully understood until after his death. When the lawyers finished untangling everything, I found myself the sole inheritor of just over $7 million. $7 million that no one knew about. Not Emma, not the extended family, not even my closest friends. David had been obsessively private about money, and his death had come so suddenly that we'd never discussed what to tell Emma about the inheritance. In my grief and confusion, I'd simply said nothing. Now, looking at Michael's trust documents, I was grateful for that silence. That evening, I called my attorney, Robert Chen, a man who had been David's friend long before he became our lawyer. Robert, I need to ask you something confidential. If someone were to try to investigate my financial situation, what would they find? Without a court order or your permission? Very little. David set things up to be quite private. The main assets are held in the blind trust, and your day-to-day accounts show a comfortable but not excessive lifestyle. Why do you ask? I told him about Michael's trust proposal. Robert listened without interruption. Sarah, he said finally, I've seen this before. Not exactly this, but similar situations. Sometimes people marry into families with the specific intention of gaining access to wealth. But how would he even know there's anything to access? I've been so careful. Has Emma said anything even innocently about your lifestyle changes, your confidence about money, anything that might suggest you're not struggling financially? I thought about it. Emma had mentioned once that I seemed less stressed about bills after David died. She'd attributed it to life insurance and David's pension, but to someone looking for clues. What do you think I should do? Let me review the documents first. Then we'll decide on the best approach. But Sarah, be very careful. If this man is what I think he is, he won't give up easily. 3 days later, while Emma and Michael were still on their honeymoon in Santorini, I sat in Robert's office reviewing his analysis of the trust documents. It's clever, Robert admitted grudgingly. Not technically fraudulent, but highly unusual for a couple married less than a week. The language here, he pointed to a section I'd highlighted, essentially gives him power of attorney over any family member's assets that get placed in the trust. And if I refuse to sign, then legally, you'd be fine, but he could make Emma's life very difficult. Look at this clause here. It states that any family member who refuses to participate in the trust structure could be considered to be acting against the family's financial interests. What does that mean? It means he could argue that you're being selfish or irresponsible. He could turn Emma against you, make you look like the obstacle to their financial security. I felt a chill run down my spine. He's thought this through. Oh, yes, this isn't his first rodeo. Sarah, I took the liberty of running a background check on Michael Rodriguez. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were credit reports, employment records, and what looked like court documents. He's not a criminal, Robert said quickly. But he has a pattern. 2 previous relationships with women from well-established families. Both relationships ended when the women's families became suspicious of his financial motives. I flipped through the documents. Michael had been engaged once before to a woman named Jessica Chen, no relation to Robert, whose family owned a successful restaurant chain. The engagement had ended abruptly after 8 months, around the time Jessica's father began asking questions about Michael's sudden interest in family business investments. The other relationship was with Rebecca Martinez, whose family had money in real estate. Same pattern, quick courtship, talk of marriage, sudden interest in family financial planning. That relationship ended when Rebecca discovered he'd been researching her family's property holdings without her knowledge. And now he's married to Emma. And he's clearly convinced there's significant money in your family. The question is, how did he figure that out? I thought about all the times Michael had been to the house, the way his eyes had lingered on certain things. David's watch collection, still displayed in the living room. The original artwork we'd bought on our anniversary trips, the fact that I'd paid for Emma's wedding without seeming to stress about the cost. He's observant, I said finally, and patient. That makes him dangerous. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Are you prepared to tell Emma the truth about your inheritance?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I don't know. I've been protecting her from so much. After David died, she was so grief-stricken, and then she was so happy with Michael. I didn't want to complicate things. But keeping secrets has complicated things. And now we're dealing with someone who's built his entire relationship with your daughter on the assumption that there's family money to be accessed. That night, I lay awake thinking about Emma, my brilliant, trusting daughter who had inherited David's big heart and my stubborn streak. She'd been so young when David died, only 24, and she'd handled her grief by throwing herself into her relationship with Michael. He'd been there for her during the darkest time, and she'd grown dependent on his strength and support. How could I tell her that the man she'd married, the man who had held her while she cried for her father, might have chosen her specifically because he thought she came with money? The next morning, I got my answer. Emma called from Greece, her voice tight with an emotion I couldn't identify. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." My heart stopped. "Of course. Sweetheart, what is it?" "Michael has been asking questions about Dad's estate, about how much life insurance there was, about the investments, about why you've seemed so stable. Since Dad died, he's not being mean about it, but he's definitely curious." "What kind of questions?" "He asked if Dad had any business investments you haven't told me about. He asked if you've been receiving payments from something, like a pension or annuity. Mom, he asked if you think Dad might have had accounts you don't know about." The room seemed to spin around me. "Emma, why is he asking these things? He says he's worried about you, that sometimes widows don't get told everything about their husband's finances, and that men of Dad's generation weren't always transparent with their wives about money. He says he wants to help make sure you're getting everything you're entitled to." It was brilliant, I had to admit. Michael was positioning himself as Emma's protector, looking out for her naive mother who might be missing out on money she deserved. Emma would see his questions as caring, not intrusive. "Sweetheart, I'm fine financially. Your father was very thorough about making sure I'd be taken care of." "But Mom, are you sure? Because Michael looked into some things, and he thinks there might be more. He found records of some business transactions from right before Dad died, and he thinks there might be assets you haven't discovered yet." My blood ran cold. "He looked into things. What do you mean?" "He used to work in financial services before he got into consulting. He knows how to research these things. He's just trying to help." "Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I need you to stop sharing information about our family's finances with Michael. Not because I don't trust him, but because these things need to be handled properly, through lawyers and accountants." There was a long pause. "Mom, are you saying you don't trust him?" "I'm saying that financial matters should be handled by professionals, not by my husband." Her voice had gone cold. "Mom, we're married. We don't have secrets from each other." "Some things need to be private until they're properly sorted out." "What things, Mom? What aren't you telling me?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 14 months of careful silence. "We'll talk when you get home. Enjoy your honeymoon." "Mom, Emma, please, just be careful about what you share, about our family, about me. Some things are better kept private." After I hung up, I sat in the kitchen staring at the phone. I'd handled that badly, and I knew it. I'd made myself look secretive and suspicious, exactly what Michael would want. Emma would go back to him with questions and concerns, and he'd be there to comfort her and reinforce her doubts about her paranoid mother. I called Robert immediately. "He's been researching David's business records." I told him. "Emma doesn't even realize what's happening. She thinks he's trying to help." "What kind of research?" "I don't know yet, but Robert, he's moving faster than we anticipated. We need to get ahead of this." "I agree, Sarah. I think it's time we set a trap. Robert's plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would create a false trail documents that suggested I had inherited a modest sum from David, perhaps $300,000, which had been largely depleted by estate taxes and Emma's wedding expenses. We would make these documents discoverable, but not obvious. If Michael was really digging into our family's finances, he would find them. The key, Robert explained, is to make the deception believable. We'll create bank statements showing regular withdrawals over the past year, living expenses, the wedding, some home improvements. We'll make it look like you're down to your last $50,000 or so. And if he takes the bait, then we'll know for certain what his motivations are, and we'll have grounds to warn Emma. It took Robert 3 days to create the false financial trail. He was thorough bank statements, tax documents, even a fictional letter from David's estate attorney explaining the disappointing final settlement. The documents were placed in a folder in my home office, inside a filing cabinet that was locked, but not impenetrably so. Emma and Michael returned from Greece on a Thursday evening. They came to the house for dinner, and I watched Michael's eyes catalog every detail of the room as if he were conducting an inventory. During dinner, he complimented the wine a bottle David and I had bought in Napa Valley years ago and asked casual questions about our trips there. "Did you and David travel a lot?" he asked. "We took a few trips," I said carefully. "David worked hard. He deserved some relaxation." Emma mentioned he was in construction. "That's a tough business. Good money, but unpredictable." "He did well enough," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. After dinner, Michael excused himself to use the bathroom upstairs. He was gone for nearly 10 minutes. When he returned, he seemed more relaxed, almost satisfied. That night, I checked the filing cabinet. The folder had been moved. I called Robert first thing the next morning. He took the bait. "Are you sure?" The documents were moved. He definitely looked at them. Good. Now we wait and see what he does with the information. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, Michael called and asked if he could come by to discuss the trust documents. He arrived with Emma, both of them looking serious. "Sarah," Michael began, settling into David's favorite armchair. "I wanted to follow up on our conversation about the family trust. I know you wanted to have your lawyer review everything." "I did. He had some questions." Michael nodded. "I figured he might. Actually, that's part of why I wanted to talk to you. Emma and I have been discussing your financial situation, and we're concerned." Emma leaned forward. "Mom, Michael explained to me how expensive estate taxes can be. We're worried that you might be struggling more than you're letting on." I forced myself to look surprised. "I'm doing fine." "But are you really?" Michael's voice was gentle, concerned. "I know you spent a lot on Emma's wedding, and I know there were significant estate taxes after David's death. I just want to make sure you're not putting yourself in a difficult position to maintain appearances. Michael, I appreciate your concern, but the trust we're proposing could help." He continued, "If you're willing to consolidate your remaining assets with ours, we could manage everything more efficiently. Pool our resources, reduce administrative costs, make sure everyone's needs are met." I stared at him, genuinely amazed by his audacity. He'd found documents suggesting I had almost nothing left, and he was still trying to get control of it. "What remaining assets are you referring to?" I asked. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Well, I know there's still some money from David's estate. And this house? Of course. Your pension. We could structure everything to maximize your security while also building something for Emma's future." "You seem to know a lot about my finances." "I just want to help. I care about this family." Emma reached over and took his hand. "He's been so worried about you. Mom, he thinks you're too proud to ask for help if you need it." I looked at my daughter, my intelligent, loving daughter, and saw that she genuinely believed Michael was trying to protect me. The man had researched my private financial records. discovered what he thought was evidence of my financial vulnerability, and was now positioning himself as my savior. I think, I said slowly, that I need to be completely honest with both of you. Michael's attention sharpened. Emma straightened in her chair. The truth is, Michael, you're right that I've been private about my finances, but you're wrong about why. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden David had planted for our 10th anniversary. David was very careful about money. He was also very private about it. When he died, I discovered that he'd been more successful than I'd realized. I turned back to face them. Much more successful. Emma's eyes widened. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying that David left me well provided for. Very well provided for. I've been private about it because I wanted to protect you, Emma, from the complications that money can bring. Michael was very still. How well provided for? I met his gaze directly. Well enough that I don't need anyone to manage my assets for me. Well enough that I can afford to be generous with my family when I choose to be. And well enough that I can afford to be very careful about who I trust with information about my finances. The silence stretched between us. Emma looked confused and hurt. Michael looked like he was rapidly recalculating something in his head. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Emma's voice was small. Because I wanted you to build your own life, make your own choices, without the pressure of knowing about family money. I wanted Michael to fall in love with you for who you are, not for what he thought you might inherit someday. Michael's face had gone carefully blank. Sarah, I hope you don't think I married Emma for money. I would never— Of course not, I said smoothly. But you can understand why I'd want to be cautious. Money changes relationships. It makes people act differently, want different things. I've been trying to protect all of us from that. I sat back down, leaning forward slightly. Now, about this trust proposal. I appreciate that you want to help with family financial planning, but I think what we really need is transparency. If we're going to be a family, we should all know where we stand. Michael's composure was slipping. What do you mean? I mean that if you're going to be managing family assets, I should know about your qualifications, your experience, your track record with other people's money. Emma looked between us, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. What's going on here? I think, I said, still watching Michael. Your husband has some questions to answer. Michael stood up abruptly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Sarah, I never meant to overstep. If you're comfortable with your financial situation, then I'm happy for you. The trust proposal was just a suggestion. Sit down, Michael. He hesitated, then sat back down. Emma was looking back and forth between us, clearly upset. Mom, what's going on? Why are you being so hostile? Emma, I need you to ask your husband about Jessica Chen and Rebecca Martinez. The color drained from Michael's face. Emma looked confused. Who? Michael's previous fiancés, both from wealthy families. Both relationships ended when their families became suspicious of his financial motives. That's not what happened, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then what did happen? I asked. Emma was staring at Michael now. You were engaged before. You never told me about any fiancés. There were relationships, Michael said carefully. They didn't work out. It's not something I like to talk about. Why didn't they work out? I pressed. Michael looked trapped. People sometimes get the wrong idea about my motivations. When you're dating someone from a well-off family, there are always suspicions. And were those suspicions justified? Sarah, I don't have to justify my past relationships to you. Actually, you do, because you married my daughter under false pretenses. Emma stood up. Mom, stop. What are you talking about? I looked at my daughter, knowing that what I was about to say would hurt her, but had to be said. Emma, your husband has been researching our family's finances since before you were married. He's been through my private papers. He's been asking you specific questions designed to get information about money. The trust proposal isn't about protecting the family. It's about gaining control of assets he believes exist. That's not true, Michael said. But his protest sounded weak. Then explain why you went through my filing cabinet 2 nights ago. Emma gasped. Michael, you didn't... I was trying to understand the family's financial situation. I wanted to make sure Sarah was really okay, not just pretending to be for your sake. You went through my mother's private papers. Emma, I was trying to protect you. I was worried that your mother might be hiding financial problems, and I didn't want you to be blindsided if something happened to her. I almost admired the way he spun it. He was still trying to make himself the hero, the concerned son-in-law looking out for his wife's naive mother. And what did you find? I asked. Michael was quiet for a long moment. I found evidence that you might be in a more difficult financial position than you've been letting on. And what did you plan to do with that information? I planned to help. By gaining control of whatever assets I had left. By making sure this family had proper financial management. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. Michael, I think you should see this. I handed him the folder. Inside were the real documents, bank statements showing the full extent of my inheritance, investment accounts worth millions, property deeds, and David's will clearly stating that everything was left to me with no restrictions. Michael opened the folder and went very still. Emma moved to look over his shoulder, and I watched her face change as she processed what she was seeing. $7 million, she whispered. 7.2 million, actually, plus the house, which is worth another 400,000, plus David's life insurance, which was separate. Emma sank back into her chair. Mom, this is incredible. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to protect you from exactly this situation. I wanted you to marry for love, not for money. I wanted to make sure that anyone who chose to be part of our family was choosing us, not our bank account. Michael was staring at the documents, his face cycling through a range of emotions. Finally, he looked up at me. You set me up. I tested you, and you failed. How? The documents you found in my filing cabinet were false. I created them to see what you would do if you thought I was nearly broke. A man who truly cared about this family would have offered to help support me. Instead, you tried to figure out how to get control of what little I seemed to have left. Emma was crying now. Michael, is this true? Michael looked at her, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something genuine in his expression. Pain. Real, raw pain. Emma, I love you. I do. But I was scared. Scared of what? Scared of being poor again. Scared of not being able to provide for you. Scared of not being good enough for your family. He put his head in his hands. I grew up with nothing. My dad left when I was 8. My mom worked 3 jobs and we still lost our house when I was in high school. I've been hungry. Emma, I've been evicted. I've slept in my car. Emma reached for his hand, but he pulled away. When I met you, you were so complete. You had this loving family, this stable life, this confidence that everything would work out. I'd never been around people who felt secure about the future. And I guess I convinced myself that if I could just get access to that security, I could finally stop being afraid. The room was very quiet. Michael was still staring at his hands. The other relationships, he continued, they weren't like this. I wasn't trying to steal anything. I was trying to find a way to belong. to be part of something stable. But when people have money, they're always suspicious. They always think you're after something. And weren't you, I asked, not unkindly? I don't know. Maybe. I told myself I was just being practical, just trying to plan for the future. But maybe I was just trying to find a way to never be scared again. Emma was crying harder now. Michael, you should have told me about your childhood, about your fears. I would have understood. Would you have married someone who was terrified of being poor? Someone who was attracted to your family partly because they seemed so financially stable? I don't know, Emma said honestly. But I would have wanted the chance to make that choice with all the information. Michael finally looked at me. Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for deceiving you, for going through your papers, for trying to manipulate the situation. I'm not proud of who I've been. I studied his face. The arrogance was gone. The calculated charm had disappeared. What was left was a scared young man who had made some very poor choices. Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you love my daughter? Yes. God. Yes. That's the worst part of all this. I do love her. I love her so much that I was willing to risk everything to try to make sure I could take care of her the way she deserves. And if there had been no money, if Emma had come from a family with nothing, he was quiet for a long time. I think I still would have fallen in love with her, but I might not have let myself. I might have walked away because I would have been too scared that I couldn't provide for her. Emma stood up and walked to the window. I need some air, she said, and left the room. Michael and I sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. What happens now? That depends on you. What do you mean? I mean that you have a choice to make. You can continue being the man who marries women for their family's money and tries to manipulate his way into financial security. Or you can become the man who faces his fears honestly and builds a life based on truth instead of deception. And Emma is my daughter, and I love her. But she's also an adult who has to make her own choices about her marriage. What I can tell you is that she deserves a husband who chose her, not her family's circumstances. Michael nodded slowly. I want to be that man. I want to be the man she deserves, but I don't know how to stop being afraid. That's something you'll have to figure out, probably with professional help. He looked up at me. Would you be willing to give me a chance to prove that I can change? I considered this. Michael, I'm not the one you need to prove anything to, but if you're serious about changing, about becoming honest, then yes, I'd be willing to see what happens. Emma came back into the room then, her face composed but her eyes red from crying. I've been thinking, she said, and I've made a decision. Michael and I both looked at her. I want to try to save our marriage, but only if we start over completely. No secrets, no games, no manipulation. We go to counseling together. Michael, you get help for your financial anxiety. And Mom, she looked at me. No more protecting me from family information. I'm old enough to handle the truth about everything. She sat down between us. We're going to be a real family. Or we're not going to be a family at all. But I'm done with everyone making decisions for me based on what they think I can handle. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her and realized that somewhere in the last few days, she had stopped being the girl I was trying to protect and had become a woman who could protect herself. I think that sounds like a very wise plan, I said. Michael nodded. Emma, I promise you, I will do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. And Sarah, I will never again try to deceive or manipulate this family. Good, Emma said, because if you do, I'll know, and I won't give you another chance. She stood up. Now, I think we should all have some wine and start figuring out how to actually be honest with each other. As I watched Emma take charge of the situation, I realized that my daughter was going to be fine. She was stronger than I'd given her credit for, and smart enough to navigate the complexities of her marriage on her own terms. The money I'd inherited from David was supposed to provide security for our family, but watching Emma stand up for herself and demand honesty from both Michael and me, I realized that the most valuable thing I could give her wasn't financial security. It was the confidence to trust her own judgment and the knowledge that she was strong enough to handle whatever challenges came her way. 6 months later, I sat in the same kitchen where this whole drama had begun, but everything had changed. Emma and Michael were there for our weekly family dinner, a tradition we'd established as part of their marriage counseling homework. The difference was remarkable. Michael looked younger somehow, less burdened. He'd been seeing a therapist who specialized in financial trauma. Apparently, it was more common than I'd realized. People who'd grown up in poverty often developed complex relationships with money that affected their adult relationships. He'd also started volunteering at a financial literacy program for low-income families, which seemed to be helping him process his own experiences. "I have something to tell you both," Emma said, setting down her wine glass. "I've been accepted to law school." Michael broke into a genuine smile, the first truly unguarded expression I'd seen from him. "Emma, that's incredible. When did you find out?" "Yesterday. I wanted to tell you both together." She looked at me. "Mom, I know you're probably wondering how I'm planning to pay for it." I laughed. "Actually, I was wondering what made you decide to go back to school. This whole situation, actually, going through everything with Michael made me realize how much I don't know about finances, about legal protections, about how to protect myself and the people I care about. I want to specialize in elder law and estate planning." "Following in your father's footsteps," I said. David had always been meticulous about legal protections, even if he'd been secretive about it. "In a way, but also carving out my own path." Michael reached over and took her hand. "I'm so proud of you." Emma smiled at him, then turned to me. "And Mom, I want to ask you something. I know you've been thinking about what to do with Dad's money, how to honor his memory with it. I had been thinking about that. $7 million was more than I could ever spend, and I'd been considering various charitable foundations. What if we use some of it to start a scholarship fund for students from low-income families who want to study law or financial planning, people who want to help other families navigate complex financial situations?" I looked at Michael, who was staring at Emma with something like awe. "I think," I said slowly, "that David would love that idea." "There's something else," Emma continued. "Michael and I have been talking, and we want to ask if you'd be willing to be a formal advisor for the scholarship fund. Not just financially, but helping to choose recipients, mentoring them. You've learned so much about protecting family wealth and navigating complex situations. You want me to help other people avoid the kinds of problems we went through." "Exactly." I looked around the table at my family, my brilliant daughter who had grown into a woman I deeply respected, and my son-in-law who had faced his demons and was working hard to become a better man. "I would be honored," I said. Michael cleared his throat. "Sarah, I want to say something. I know I've apologized before, but I want to acknowledge again what I put this family through. I was so focused on my own fears that I almost destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me." He looked at Emma, then back at me. "I've learned that real security doesn't come from controlling other people's money. It comes from building trust, from being honest, from creating something together instead of trying to take something that doesn't belong to you." Emma squeezed his hand. "And I've learned that protecting people from information doesn't actually protect them. It just makes them unprepared for reality." She looked at me. "We've all learned some things." After dinner, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Emma asked me something I'd been expecting. "Mom, do you think you'll ever remarry?" The question would have terrified me a year ago. The idea of letting someone new into my life, someone who might have complicated motivations about my money, had seemed impossible. "I don't know," I said, honestly. "But I'm not ruling it out. I've learned that keeping secrets to protect yourself can sometimes do more harm than good. What would you do differently next time?" I'd be honest from the beginning. About the money, about my concerns, about everything. I'd trust that the right person would be able to handle the truth. Michael spoke up. "Sarah, can I ask you something? Why did you decide to give me a second chance?" I thought about it. Because you were honest about your mistakes once you were caught. Because you were willing to get help. And because Emma chose to fight for your marriage. But mostly because I could see that underneath all the fear and manipulation, you really do love my daughter. I do. More than I ever thought possible. I know. And Michael, I need you to know that I don't blame you entirely for what happened. I created the situation that made deception seem necessary. If I'd been honest with Emma from the beginning about her father's inheritance, none of this would have happened. Emma leaned back in her chair. "You know what's funny? I spent so much time thinking about whether Michael married me for money and whether you were hiding money from me, but I never stopped to think about what I really wanted." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, I was so focused on being loved for myself, on proving that I wasn't just a trust fund kid, that I never asked myself what kind of life I actually wanted to build, what my own goals were, independent of anyone else's money or expectations." She gestured toward the house. "This whole experience forced me to figure out who I am and what I want. Law school, the scholarship fund, building a marriage based on honesty instead of assumptions, those are my choices. For the first time in my adult life, I feel like I'm making decisions based on what I want, not what I think other people want from me." As the evening grew darker, I found myself thinking about David. He'd been so careful about protecting our wealth, but he'd also been secretive about it in ways that had created problems. If he were here now, what would he think about how everything had turned out? I thought he'd be proud of Emma for taking control of her own life. I thought he'd approve of Michael's efforts to change and grow. And I hoped he'd understand that sometimes the best way to protect the people you love is to trust them with the truth. "I have one more thing to tell you both," I said. "I've been thinking about moving." Emma looked surprised. "Moving where?" "Somewhere smaller. This house is too big for one person, and it has too many memories. I was thinking about getting a condo downtown, something modern and low maintenance." "What would you do with this house?" I smiled. "I was hoping you two might want to buy it from me. At a fair market price, of course. It would be a good investment for you. And I'd love to see it filled with a family again." Emma and Michael looked at each other, communicating in that wordless way that couples develop. "We'd love that," Emma said. "But only if you're sure. This is your home." "No," I said, looking around at the garden David had planted, the rooms where Emma had grown up, the kitchen where we'd fought and reconciled and learned to be honest with each other. This was our home. Now it's time for it to be your home. As we made plans for the future, the house purchase, the scholarship fund, Emma's law school applications, I realized that the inheritance David had left me had been more than money. It had been the foundation for building something new, something honest, something that would last. The money itself was just a tool. What mattered was how we chose to use it, and how we chose to treat each other in the process. Looking at Emma and Michael, seeing the genuine affection between them and the respect they'd earned from each other through honesty and hard work, I knew that David would be proud of what his legacy had made possible. Sometimes the best way to protect your family is to give them the tools and knowledge they need to protect themselves. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the confidence to make their own choices. even when those choices might be different from what you would have chosen for them. And sometimes, the most valuable inheritance you can leave isn't money at all. It's the example of how to live with integrity, how to face difficult truths, and how to build relationships based on trust instead of fear. As we sat together on the porch, planning our future as a family, I felt something I hadn't experienced since David died complete peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest, and for the first time in over a year, that felt like enough. Epilogue. 1 year later. The Scholarship Fund had awarded its first grants to 12 students, including a young woman named Maria, whose story reminded me so much of Michael's childhood that I'd asked her to speak at our annual fundraising dinner. She stood at the podium in the hotel ballroom, poised and articulate, talking about how financial literacy education had changed her family's trajectory. "Before I learned about budgeting and investment," she said, "my family lived paycheck to paycheck, constantly afraid of the next emergency. Now my mother has a savings account for the first time in her life, and I'm planning to start a financial consulting business to help other families in my community." From my table near the front, I watched Emma take notes. She was writing an article about the scholarship program for the law school newsletter. Michael was beside her, and I caught him wiping his eyes as Maria described the fear of poverty that had shaped her childhood decisions. After the event, as we drove home together, Emma said, "I'm proud of what we've built." "Me too," I replied. "Your father would be amazed. I think he'd be proud that we figured out how to turn his money into something that creates opportunities instead of problems." Michael spoke up from the back seat. "Sarah, I want you to know that speaking with Maria tonight made me realize something. I spent so many years being ashamed of where I came from, trying to hide my background. But seeing her turn her experiences into strength, it makes me think I might be able to do the same thing." "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking about going back to school too, maybe getting a degree in social work or counseling. I'd like to help other people who are struggling with financial trauma." Emma turned to look at him. "Michael, that's a wonderful idea. I know it would mean more school, more debt, starting over in a new career, but I think I'd be good at it. And I think it would help me continue healing from my own issues." I smiled, remembering the calculating young man who had sat at my kitchen table 18 months ago, trying to figure out how to access my money. The man in my car now was someone entirely different, someone who wanted to use his experiences to help others rather than to get ahead himself. "I think you'd be excellent at it," I told him. "And I think the Scholarship Fund should support people like you, two people who want to go back to school to help their communities." "Would you really consider that, Michael, your family?" "Of course I'd consider it." As we pulled into the driveway of the house that was now Emma and Michael's home, I'd moved into my downtown condo 6 months earlier. I reflected on how much had changed. Emma was in her second year of law school, top of her class and already working with professors on research about financial elder abuse. Michael had started volunteer counseling at a community center and was applying to graduate programs in therapy. And I had discovered that retirement didn't mean stopping work. It meant finding work that felt meaningful. "Before you go up," I said as we got out of the car, "I have something for you both." From my purse, I pulled out 2 envelopes. "What's this?" Emma asked. "Your wedding gift, the real one." Emma opened her envelope first. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a letter. "Mom, this is too much." "Read the letter." She unfolded it and read aloud. "Emma, this money is for your education and your future. But more importantly, it comes with a promise I will never again make major decisions about our family without including you. You have shown me that protecting someone from information doesn't protect them. It just keeps them from making informed choices. I trust your judgment, and I respect your right to know the truth about everything that affects our family. Love, Mom." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Mom." "Open yours, Michael." Michael's envelope contained a smaller check, $10,000, and a shorter letter. He read it silently, then looked up at me with surprise. "You're sure about this? What does it say?" Emma asked. Michael cleared his throat. "It says, Michael, this money is to help you start your new career in counseling. But it comes with a condition: you must use your experiences, both the mistakes and the healing, to help other people. You have learned something valuable about the difference between security and greed, between protecting people and controlling them. Share that knowledge. Love, Sarah." We stood in the driveway for a moment, the three of us, and I thought about how different this scene was from that first morning after the wedding, when Michael had slid his contract across my kitchen table. "I have one more thing to tell you," I said. "I've been thinking about dating again." Emma's eyebrows shot up. "Really? Anyone in particular?" "Actually, yes, Robert Chen." "Your lawyer mom. That's wonderful. How long has this been going on?" "About 3 months. We've been taking it very slowly, talking through everything. He knows about the money, obviously, since he's been managing it. But more importantly, he knows about everything we've been through as a family. He understands why honesty is so important to me now." Michael grinned. "Does this mean we're going to have to give him the 3rd degree about his intentions?" "Actually, I think I can handle that myself now, but thank you for offering." As Emma and Michael headed into their house, I sat in my car for a moment, looking at the home where I'd raised my daughter, where I'd learned to be a widow, where I'd discovered that sometimes the best way to protect someone is to trust them. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "How did the dinner go? I'm proud of what you're building with that scholarship fund." I smiled as I typed back, "It went perfectly. Come over for coffee tomorrow, and I'll tell you all about it." As I drove to my own home, my new home, in my new life, I thought about the inheritance David had left me. $7 million had seemed like an enormous responsibility when I'd first discovered it. I'd been so afraid of what it might do to my family, so worried about protecting Emma from its complications. But money, I'd learned, was never the real issue. The real issue was trust, fear, communication, the willingness to be vulnerable with the people you love. David's greatest gift to me hadn't been financial security. It had been the foundation for learning how to build honest relationships, how to face difficult truths, and how to create something meaningful from the resources we'd been given. As I pulled into my parking garage, I felt David's presence in a way I hadn't since he died. Not sadness or grief, but gratitude. He had given me the tools to build a life I was proud of, a family that was stronger for having been tested, and a legacy that would help other families avoid the mistakes we'd made. The inheritance trap had been sprung, but instead of catching us, it had set us free. And that, I thought as I rode the elevator up to my new life, was the best possible ending to our story.